Alright, y'all. What's up? What's good? It's Ashlyn. Alright, so, as promised, we're gonna read Lemony Snicket's Horseradish, Bitter Truths You Can't Avoid. I mean, why not, right? And sorry if it's super dark, you're just gonna have to deal with it, because that's just how I feel today. Not super dark that I feel, I just feel like being in a dimly lit room right now, if that makes any sense. All right. So this says, many collections slap together the wit and wisdom of certain authors in the hopes of inspiring a reader at a crucial time in his or her life. Instead, this book contains a bouquet of alarming but inescapable truths from the work of Lemony Snicket, along with selections from his unpublished papers and remarks he has made at dinner parties and anarchist riots, in order to remind the reader that even the loftiest of inspirations contains a sharp, bitter kernel of dread, and vice versa. And this is from the HarperCollins publishers. So, let's get started. If you guys are all ready, and if you're following along and you grabbed your book, congratulations. That's awesome. If you want, if it is raining in your area right now, like it is storming in mine, hence the little dimly lit area, because raining weather in a dimly lit bedroom, one, make you tired, but two, makes for a better thing. And we're talking about bitter truths you can't avoid, so it makes it even better. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. There is an old story which may or may not interest you, but nevertheless will be the bulk of this introduction, the way a horrid breakfast can be the bulk of your morning, or a long car chase can be the bulk of your week. The story concerns a woman who lived in a small grass hut with her husband in a remote village surrounded by an enormous field of horseradish, which is a very bitter root. Like many people, the woman and her husband did not care for horseradish, so every morning the woman would fish for lake snails, while her husband would gather raisins in the fields. And each night they would have a horrid meal of raisin-stuffed snails. After several years of this, the woman began to wonder something. "Husband," she wondered out loud one evening, "life must be more than sitting at home doing the same thing over and over, don't you think?" "Beats me," said her husband, with his mouth full of snail. "But the other day your mother was telling me about a wise man who lives on top of a mountain someplace. He'd probably know." "That's interesting," the woman said, and excused herself from the table to walk to the next door hut, where her mother was sitting on a grass sofa, gazing out a grass window at the field of horseradish and cutting her toenails. "What's this I hear about a wise man?" the woman asked her mother, wondering if life was more than watching one's relatives do unpleasant things. "Miss Matmos told me about him," the woman's mother said, struggling with a particularly difficult toenail. "Miss Matmos," the woman repeated. "You mean my old third-grade teacher?" "She lives on the other side of the horseradish field, near the fishing pole storage facility," the woman's mother said. "And she was saying something about a wise old man who lives on top of the mountain." The woman hurried through the field of horseradish to the fishing pole storage facility, where every day she hung her fishing pole next. One second. Where every day she hung her fishing pole next to all the other fishing poles for safekeeping. Sure enough, Miss Matmos was sitting nearby, writing insults in the margins of her students' papers. The woman watched her old third-grade teacher scrawl, "You're an idiot," in bright red ink, and wondered if life was more than the grim tasks one must perform at school and at work. "Miss Matmos, I was wondering if you knew anything about a wise man who lives on the top of a mountain." "Well, the mountain is very far away, and the climb is very difficult, and quite dull. If you're going to go, I'd suggest you take a book with you." Miss Matmos handed the woman a book and sent her on her way, which was as far difficult and dull as the third grade teacher had described it. As the woman walked the hundreds of miles to the mountain, she read the book to Ratters, and although it was a wonderful story called A High Wind in Jamaica, she could not help wondering if life was more than being entertained by literature. Okay. As she made her way through the thorny bushes that grew at the base of the mountain, she grew exhausted and thought sadly of her husband, and she wondered if life was more than traveling from one place to another, suffering from poor emotional health, and pondering the people one loves. As she climbed the mountain's monotonous peak, she stared down at some people at the bottom of the mountain who appeared to be doing something suspicious, and stared up at the dull gray flowers that grew in the mountain's cracks, and she wondered about people who led a life of mystery, and about the mysteries of life. As she approached the top of the mountain, where she could see the condominium owned by the wise man, it grew very dark, and the woman wondered about the overall feeling of doom that one cannot ever escape, no matter what one does. She grew closer and closer, and kept wondering about all the things she had been wondering about for these many months, as well as miscellaneous things that I have neglected to mention in specific. Finally, the woman was so high up that her grass hut was merely a faraway green speck, and the horseradish field a tiny bitter square. But without even a glance at where she had come from, she knocked on the door of the condominium, and within moments she was facing the man she had come all this way to see. "Oh, great wise man, I have been wondering so many things. Is life more than sitting at home doing the same thing over and over? Wise man, is life more than watching one's relatives do unpleasant things, or more than the grim tasks one must perform at school and at work? Is life more than being entertained by literature, wise man, or more than traveling from one place to another? Suffering from poor emotional health and pondering the people one loves? And what about those who led a life of mystery and the mysteries of life? And wise man, what about the overall feeling of doom that one cannot ever escape no matter what one does, and miscellaneous things that I have neglected to mention in specific?" But the man was already shaking his head. "You have it all wrong. I'm not a wise man. I'm a wide man." He took a step closer to her, and sure enough, the woman could see that he was substantially overweight, particularly around the hips. "Then you don't know the answers to my questions?" "No, and furthermore, this is private property." With a slam of the door and a rude harumph, the man was gone, and the woman began her long, difficult, and dull journey all the way back to her home. When she finally approached the grass huts, quite tired and extremely hungry, she saw her mother sitting on the front grass stoop, cleaning her ears with a long, slender pole the woman recognized at once. "That's my fishing pole," said the woman. "I need it for work." "Where in the world have you been? You walked away in the middle of our conversation. I didn't hear from you for months, so I assumed you didn't want your fishing pole anymore." "I've been on a long, disappointing journey. Aren't you even going to welcome your daughter home?" "I have a new daughter," the mother bragged, and then called into her hut. "Come on out, sweetie." To the woman's surprise, Miss Matmos stepped out of the hut, dressed in a long white bridal gown. Following alongside was the woman's husband, who was wearing a tuxedo. "You just got up in the middle of dinner and left for many months," explained the husband. "So now I'm getting myself a new wife, who asks fewer questions than you do." "I'd invite you to the wedding feast," said the woman's mother, "but I don't want to. Now please excuse us. The wedding procession is about to begin." The woman heard a fanfare of kazoos and saw that many of her neighbors had gathered to usher the bridal couple to the far corner of the horseradish field, where a rabbi was waiting to marry them. The woman's mother led the way, followed by the husband and Miss Matmos, and before long the woman was all alone, still quite tired and extremely hungry. Knowing that she would not get a bite of the catered food at the wedding feast, she tugged a horseradish root out of the ground and gnawed at it glumly. As the bitter taste invaded the woman's mouth, the same mouth that had asked all those questions to which she still did not know the answers, the new bride turned around and called out one last thing to her. "By the way, I was going over my old grade books, and it turns out you flunked third grade." The moral of this story, if you are interested, is that there are bitter truths you cannot avoid in this world, whether you are wondering about home, family, school, work, entertainment, literature, travel, emotional health affairs of the heart, a life of mystery, the mystery of life, an overall feeling of doom that one cannot ever escape no matter what one does, and miscellaneous things that I have neglected to mention in specific. For your convenience, some of these bitter truths have been placed into the somewhat handy book and arranged into 13 chapters, so that anytime you are wondering about something, you can open the book and read a bitter truth or two, rather than go to the trouble of trying to find a wise man, particularly in your neighborhood, where so few of them live. Home. The difference between a house and a home is like the difference between a man and a woman. It might be embarrassing to explain, but it would be very unusual to get them confused. There is something marvelous about returning home at the end of a long day, even if there is tuna fish for dinner. What's wrong with tuna fish? The fuck? There are some people who believe that home is where one hangs one's hat, but these people tend to live in closets on little pegs. An old cowboy song celebrates home on the range, where deer and antelope play, but anyone who has seen deer and antelope knows that when they are frolicking, they scarcely look where they are flinging their hooves, which is why cowboys have been pummeled almost to extinction. It is always sad when someone leaves home, unless they are simply going around the corner and will return in a few minutes with ice cream sandwiches. Okay. One's home is like a delicious piece of pie you order in a restaurant on a county road one cozy evening, the best piece of pie you have ever eaten in your life and can never find again. After you leave home, you may find yourself feeling homesick, even if you have a new home that has nicer wallpaper and a more efficient dishwasher than the home in which you grew up. And no matter how many times you visit, you may never quite cure yourself of the fluttery homesick feeling in your stomach. Homesickness can even strike you when you are still living at home, but a home that has changed over the years, and you long for the time, even if such a time existed only in your imagination, when your home was as delicious as you remember. You may search your family and your mind, just as you might search dark and winding country roads, trying to recapture the best time in your life so that you might cure your homesickness with a second slice of that distant, far away, my gosh, I cannot read. Faraway pie, but your search will end in vain, as you have lost the map that told you where to turn, and the restaurant has long ago burned down, and the baker who made the pie has gotten tired of waiting for you and has devoted her life to making tomato paste instead, but she is no good at it, and now you are lost in life, the darkness closing in on you, with nothing but a sad flutter in your stomach and a sour, acidic taste in your mouth. Whoa. An American writer of my acquaintance titled one of his books, "You Can't Go Home Again," but he was not necessarily talking to you. Ooh, this is going to be a tough one, you guys. This next section is family. Perhaps if we saw what ached of us and glimpsed the crimes, follies, and misfortunes that would befall us later on, we would all stay in our mother's wombs, and then there would be nobody in the world but a great number of very fat, very irritated women. Russian writer. Lovely. A certain Russian writer said that happy families are all alike, which is absurd. Some happy families do nothing but train seals all day, while others prefer to paint pictures of flowers on pieces of pottery and sell them for outrageous prices at fairs. There are happy families who consist of nothing but a happy father and his happy twin sons, and there are happy families who have so many happy cousins that whenever the happy family wants to go somewhere together, they have to run an entire happy bus to do so. There are happy families who live in the happy center of certain happy cities, and there are happy families who run a different happy hut on a different happy island every happy week. Really, the only thing that all happy families have in common is happiness and perhaps a certain sagginess around the cheeks from smiling all the livelong day. Unless you are a hermit or half of a pair of Siamese twins, you probably enjoy taking the occasional break from members of your family to enjoy some privacy, perhaps with a friend or companion, in your room or in a railway car you have managed to sneak aboard. There are some who say that you should forgive everyone, even the people who have disappointed you immeasurably. There are others who say you should not forgive anyone, and should stomp off in a huff no matter how many times they apologize. Of these two philosophies, the second one is, of course, much more fun, but it can also grow exhausting to stomp off in a huff every time someone has disappointed you, as everyone disappoints everyone eventually, and one can't stomp off in a huff every minute of the day. Siblings who claim to get along all the time are most definitely hiding something. Arguing with somebody is never pleasant, but sometimes it is useful and necessary to do so. Babies pop into this world in the usual way, and from that moment the baby's families have to do their best to guess what might make the baby happy, like guessing the answer to a riddle. But many riddles are difficult to guess, which is why one sees so many babies crying their little eyes out, as if they wish they could simply pop back out of the world the way they came. Temper tantrums, however fun they may be to throw, rarely solve whatever problem is causing them. It is not very polite to interrupt a person, of course, but sometimes if the person is very unpleasant, you can hardly stop yourself. One day, when your mother is yelling at you, you might begin to hear a tiny voice in your head that will tell you that you are right and your mother is wrong. Over the years, this voice might get louder and louder, and you might find that you prefer listening to this voice instead of your mother's voice, particularly if she has been yelling at you this whole time. School. Something I'm not in anymore. A long time ago, there was no such thing as school, and children spent their days learning a trade, a phrase which here means standing around doing tedious tasks under the instruction of a bossy adult. In time, however, people realized that the children could be allowed to sit, and the first school was invented. The expression, those who can't do, teach, is a curious one, because if you look at the world, you'll see that teachers aren't particularly worse at doing things than anyone else, so perhaps the expression might be better worded as nobody can do anything. Most schools have a system of loud bells, which startle the students and teachers at regular intervals and remind them that the time is passing even more slowly than it seems. Anyone who asks you to describe your summer vacation in writing probably has a secret, infernal plan, and under no circumstances should you include in your report even a hint of the truth. Recess is a part of the school day designed to give children a break from the more unpleasant aspects of the educational system, but so many schoolyards are full of villainous students that recess can often turn out to be the most unpleasant part of the day. I hated recess. I got lunch detention in middle school, in elementary school, so I didn't have to go to recess because I was being bullied by the females at recess. Go figure. If you try to avoid every instance of peer pressure, you will end up without any peers whatsoever, and the trick is to succumb to enough pressure that you do not drive your peers away, but not so much that you end up in a situation in which you are dead or otherwise uncomfortable. This is a difficult trick, and most people never master it, and end up dead or uncomfortable at least once during their lives. Oftentimes, when people are miserable, they will want to make other people miserable too, but it never helps. Work! I can relate to this. In most cases, the best strategy for a job interview is to be fairly honest, because the worst thing that can happen is that you won't get the job and will spend the rest of your life foraging for food in the wilderness and seeking shelter underneath a tree or the awning of a bowling alley that has gone out of business. Business cards, of course, are not proof of anything. Anyone can go to a print shop and have cards made that say anything they like. The King of Denmark can order business cards that say he sells golf balls. Your dentist can order business cards that say she is your grandmother. In order to escape from the castle of an enemy of mine, I once had cards printed that said I was an admiral in the French Navy. Just because something is typed, whether it is typed on a business card or typed in a newspaper or book, this does not mean that it is true. It's actually really intelligent. Fetching objects for people who are too lazy to fetch them for themselves is never a pleasant task, particularly when the people are insulting you. A newspaper, as I'm sure you know, is a collection of supposedly true stories written down by writers who either saw them happen or talked to people who did. These writers are called journalists, and like telephone operators, butchers, ballerinas, and people who clean up after horses, journalists can sometimes make mistakes. It has been said that the hardest job in the world is raising a child, but the people who say this have probably never worked at a comb factory or captured pirates on the high seas. I can see that. Just because something is traditional is no reason to do it, of course. Piracy, for example, is a tradition that has been carried on for hundreds of years, but that doesn't mean we should all attack ships and steal their gold. Members of your family might say they are working hard all day long, while you are off at school or clarinet lessons, but the only way to know this for sure is to follow them at a discreet distance. Labor Day is a holiday honoring those who work for a living. Laborist Day is a lesser-known holiday honoring those who cannot stop talking about their work. Like people, animals will become frightened and likely do whatever you say if you whip them enough. I'm going to take a break and get some positive YouTube in for a few minutes. See you soon. Alright, y'all, I was going to read more to you, but I decided completely against it. I have to purge through my closet because I have a bunch of clothes that do not fit. So I'm going to go ahead and record that video for you probably now. Maybe. I need to get it done. And this is my only other day off. And then I work from tomorrow until Sunday at 11 p.m. So, with that being said, there's a lot to get done. Especially with Christmas around the corner and my birthday and all that fun stuff. 9 times out of 10, I'm going to get some type of clothing and I need to have the space for it. And I need to make sure my size is correct. I may or may not have ordered some more clothes because I love horror stuff and I found a great deal on a bunch of horror shirts, so I'm gonna go hang it off here. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye! Oops.